silence until you come and sit a while with me.
So I graduated in 2012 with a degree, a bachelor's degree in media music studies, which is essentially music composition for contemporary music. I studied at BYU for 4 years, and while I was there, I had a really, I feel like I had a really well-rounded opportunity to learn about vocal music and instrumental music and MIDI composition and different things. But one thing that really caught my eye was this a cappella group, Vocal Point. In my sophomore year, one of my professors said, "Hey, I direct this group called Vocal Point. You ought to come and audition for it." He knew I was a singer. We had a little bit of history with different classes. And so I didn't know anything about it, but I went and I auditioned for the group, and I just fell in love with the a cappella thing and creating harmonies together. And here I am almost 12 years later, after 4 years in the group. I'm now on my 8th season directing the group Vocal Point, and it's been a blessing in my life for sure. Like I said, I took the job to direct Vocal Point in 2012, and I got the job right out of school. It was interesting. I walked across the stage to get my diploma to shake the gentleman's hand, and it was the director, the chair of the School of Music, and he said, "Hey, call me next week. I have a job offer for you." Because that year that I graduated, our director was retiring, and so it was kind of a really natural transition time. I had been in the group for 4 years. I studied music. I kind of knew the purpose and the vision behind the group Vocal Point, and so it was a really awesome opportunity, I felt like, for me right out of school, and a natural fit for Vocal Point. So I graduated in spring of 2012 and started directing the group in fall of 2012, and while the group has definitely changed and we've taken it slightly in a different direction and tried to brand ourselves a little differently than maybe we were back in those days in 2012 and before, I feel like a lot of the same core values of what the group is all about is the same, in that it's a family-friendly group trying to bring positive music to people wherever they are. And luckily now we have the internet to help us get it to quite a few more folks than we were able to back in those early days. So Vocal Point started in 1991. It was founded by a couple of college students who traveled to the East Coast and saw some more contemporary a cappella groups and said, we need something like this back at BYU. And so they started the group, and the group got so much traction and became so popular on campus. They were selling out shows and standing room only and all sorts of crazy things that 3 years later, in 1994, the chair of the School of Music at BYU said, "Hey, we see what you guys are doing. It's a really cool thing. We'd love to bring you on board as an official class, an official part of the university." And so in 94, they were adopted into the School of Music. And there's been a little bit of change in terms of where Vocal Point resides. They now reside under the umbrella of the Performing Arts Management offices at BYU. But it's a class at BYU. The students receive college credit for it. And it's a really fun and I think important part of the BYU campus community. And that's been a fun thing to see grow for sure over the last little while. Yeah, so BYU has a really awesome music program. I would definitely say that the music program lends itself to a classical musical experience. However, in recent years, they've really tried to expand and grow in terms of offering contemporary fields and emphases in their music degrees. The commercial music program, which is kind of the program that my major turned into, it's actually the most competitive major at BYU in terms of the percentage of people who apply and those who get in. It's the most competitive major at BYU. So there are a lot of folks who want to get in, and with the addition of new faculty members that they've just recently added, the school has been doing a great job at offering music recording degree emphases, music business, singer-songwriter, composition, orchestration, all sorts of different things that if you don't want to teach music but want to go have a professional career in either composing, performing, arranging, whatever it is, there's definitely a track for you at BYU. And I don't know if that was the case, say, 15 years ago, because the program was just getting started. but there's lots of BYU alumni who are working in Hollywood, scoring films and making music for television, performing in symphonies, in professional choirs and different things. And I know many of those folks attribute their successes to a lot of what they learned at BYU. The BYU performing culture is really unique in that way, in that there are many different types of ensembles, all the way from gamelan, like Balinese gamelan, to traditional choral, to string quartets, to jazz groups, both vocal and instrumental, to the a cappella groups that they have. There are quite a few different programs throughout the year that BYU will put on where they'll combine a lot of these different talented groups, and they'll put on a big kind of extravaganza. And those are really cool performances to see these students, not professionals yet, but many who hope to become that, bring their time and their talents together to create these really cool things for the community. Another interesting thing about the BYU performing program is the touring program that they have. I don't know the exact number, but I want to say it's somewhere in the 15 to 20 groups travel every summer to different areas of the world, essentially being ambassadors for Brigham Young University, letting people know about the school, but they'll go and they'll put on concerts all over the world. Last year, Vocal Point traveled to both China and to Thailand, and there were groups in Brazil and around the United States and Canada and South America, and it's just really fun to see these students who aspire to become professionals someday getting real hands-on learning and performance experience, which I think is the best kind of education, actually doing what you're hoping to be doing. And that happens every year at BYU. And so I think those kinds of opportunities are often what lead so many of these BYU alumni to have professional careers in music, because they've not just learned in a classroom and studied out of a book, but they've figured out how to do it because they are every day doing those very things and learning those skills. So BYU is based in Provo, Utah. Provo is a fairly large community, fairly large city in the Utah County, Salt Lake County area. But it's definitely known for being a college town. Provo has a couple of different schools in it, universities, not even just BYU. There's a different university just a few miles down the road, Utah Valley University, which is actually bigger than BYU. And so many of the people who live in Provo are students, and many only stay for the years that they're in school and will leave. But I think because of that, the music scene and the music community is so strong. I mean, you've got bands like Neon Trees and Imagine Dragons that started in Provo. And there really is a cool culture of kind of, let's try our own thing, let's figure this out, let's create music together. And as a result, I think people innovate and create in a really cool way. Vocal Point specifically, I mean, like I said, it started in '91 by a couple of students, and they were bright and they were bold and wanted to try something cool, but they didn't have a ton of experience. But because of that, they tried new things and created this really cool a cappella group that has kind of stood the test of time and is still a really popular entity here in Utah locally. And now we're having opportunities to travel around the country and around the world. And one cool thing about what the internet has brought to Vocal Point is recognition, not just here locally in Provo, but in different pockets of the world. And that's really, really rewarding to see. And it's interesting, these students, like I said, they don't get paid to be in Vocal Point. This isn't a job for them. It's something that they elect to do because they love it. They want to spread positive music, and to see them get the payoff of traveling around and having these people love and appreciate what they do is really neat. It's rewarding as a director to see these students get that payoff, and kind of what keeps me going every year doing the same old thing. The arrangements that Vocal Point sings they come from a few different places. I would say most of the arranging myself, with a little bit of a background in music. I studied music at BYU. Music was a large part of my growing up life. In fact, my parents were professional musicians growing up. My dad was the music director for an old television show called The Donnie and Marie Show, and my mom was a backup singer on the show for Donnie. And they met making music together and doing that as the first part of their kind of livelihood during the early years of their marriage. they had 5 kids. I'm the fourth of 5, and none of my other siblings have pursued music. But for some reason, I just kind of caught that bug, and music's been something that I've loved and been passionate about from a very young age. And so, growing up, I loved to compose and make and write different musical things and ideas. And like I said, decided to study it at BYU, and so that's kind of, I think, helped me prepare for what I'm doing now with Vocal Point, creating most of the arrangements. Most of the videos you see online are mine. Some of the different ones we do in shows and concerts, we'll have students do, former Vocal Point guys who have a skill at arranging. Sometimes they'll do those. But it's most of the time kept within our Vocal Point family, and I think that's part of what contributes to the unique sound that Vocal Point has, is that we keep that arranging, that kind of beginning of the musical idea that you hear comes from that same musical family. So, but yeah, it's a really fun thing. I do a lot of the arrangements right here behind me, and then we take them to the guys. We rehearse them. Obviously, we'll make tweaks and make it feel just right with the group that we're singing with, and then oftentimes, especially when we're making videos, we'll take it to the studio really quickly after that. And I remember one of our videos. It was one of our first videos. I think it was Happy, and we heard the original version by Pharrell, and the guys were really into the song. I wasn't super into the song, but they begged and finally decided, okay, we're gonna make this a music video. Arranged the song. I think it was like on a Monday or Tuesday. I made some demo tracks for them to learn it. We rehearsed and auditioned solos. I think we recorded the guys on Friday, and then we shot a video on Saturday, and we released it the next week. So it was a really quick turnaround. And oftentimes when you're working in pop music, you wanna ride on the coattails of some of those social trends and some of those trending items, and that's what we wanted to do with that one. But it's fun making these arrangements and trying to find a good balance between choral writing and contemporary pop sound. It's really interesting because, as you know, with a cappella music, you're mimicking instruments, you're mimicking textures, and it's not just straight choral writing like you might sing in some groups. And so oftentimes the arrangement process it's different every single time. Sometimes you're trying to make your singers sound like trumpets, and other times you're trying to make them sound like computers, and other times they're actually humans and singing words, and that's a fun process to be part of as well. But yeah, the arrangement process is something, like I said, we keep within the Vocal Point family, and a lot of the stuff you hear with Vocal Point is stuff that I've done. BYU does have a publishing arm through it's called BYU Music Group. So there's the record label of BYU Records, and then BYU Publishing, all run under kind of the same music group office. And they're awesome. They're so supportive of what we do with Vocal Point, as well as all the other music ensembles at BYU. But most of our arrangements, at least the ones that we put on our YouTube channel, can be found online. You can purchase the sheet music, and that's because of the publishing arm that we have at BYU. I think there are a lot of choices and a lot of opportunities and a lot of different things you can do when you decide you want to study music. So one thing I've appreciated about working at BYU making music is the fact that they always like to do everything in terms of permissions and copyrights and licenses. They like to do it 100% right. And so for Vocal Point, we do a lot of recording, a lot of music for video, for streaming, and anytime that we do that, we secure the proper licenses and copyrights to be able to make those recordings. We work with, there's a campus entity, the BYU Copyright Office, that secures all of those for us. And then additionally, our record label helps us get sync licenses when we're doing music videos and different things like that. I luckily don't have to worry a lot about that kind of thing because this office takes care of it for us. But as an artist, as a composer, I appreciate that because we're all working hard and we're trying to do our thing. And when you see people stealing music and going about things the wrong way, it just kind of rubs you the wrong way because that's not what music's all about. Music's about including people and connecting people. And so I'm grateful to work at BYU where they do that, where they get these permissions so that we can share our music liberally and not be afraid that something like that's going to happen where we're getting caught and whatnot. But yeah, it's a large process. Sometimes it takes days, sometimes it takes months. When we do these larger shows with big guest artists like Kristen Chenoweth, Gladys Knight, Ben Rector, some of these guys, the Copyright Office is working for months and months to make sure to secure all the right clearances for performance. But like I said, in the end, we're always grateful to do it that way so that we can just share our music and not be worried about anything else but connecting with other people. Yes, so every year BYU puts on a big spectacle show called BYU Spectacular, and they center it around the week of homecoming, and so it's fun because we're welcoming a lot of guests back to the university that have come through the programs throughout their lives, and they all come back and kind of the culminating event of this week, I would say maybe two culminating events. There's the football game that everyone comes back for, but in recent years, especially this BYU Spectacular show is bringing in tons of folks to not even just the local community, but people will fly in and come back to this BYU Spectacular show because it's turned into such a great thing. Like I mentioned, we've brought in artists like Gladys Knight, Colby Calais, Kristen Chenoweth, David Archuleta, Ben Rector, and it's really cool to see these professionals work with the students. It's a really interesting show because a lot of times these professionals will their touring acts are them performing their concert with their band and they do their thing and it's very rehearsed and polished. And this BYU Spectacular show is a bit different because we invite them to come and they do a couple of their own songs. But the real kind of unique factor of the show is that these artists then perform with the student groups. And the student groups will learn some of the artist's music and perform them in interesting ways. And so you've got dance groups, you've got bands, orchestras, the a cappella groups, choirs, all creating individual unique takes on these artists' music and then performing them for the community here. And it's been awesome. I remember this past spectacular, we had Ben Rector come, who's a popular, well-known singer-songwriter. And watching him interact with my vocal point guys was probably the highlight of the whole show for me. He was about as real as you could ever want any celebrity to be. I know for at least my guys and many of the students, he was a like big deal for them. And gosh, if I could ever be someone, I want to be him kind of a person. And watching them ask him questions and Ben treating them like normal friends and people, it was a great example to show that notoriety that he's received hasn't changed him, and he's using his notoriety to do good things. But it's yet another thing that these BYU students in their music education get the opportunity to do. They're not only learning about it and doing it themselves, but then we bring in these big artists who further that education and give them kind of big old master classes, hands-on. This is how you do it. This is what you do. And I think for a lot of the students, those spectacular shows are a highlight of their college career. Getting to create something really special and then share it with these big celebrities. Yeah, so like I said, Vocal Point was started in 1991, and I want to say it was about 9 years later, around 2000. The date might not be exactly right, but some members of Vocal Point decided, gosh, we need to start an all-female group, and along with some really talented women, started the group Noteworthy. And they've been a sister group to Vocal Point for all of these years. And like Vocal Point, they started out as a student-run, kind of a student-initiated group, what you might consider a club of sorts. And just a few years ago, they became an official part of the school as well. And so they are now also a college class at BYU and are doing some amazing things. And Amy Whitcomb is their director and is super talented. And she finds some of the best female voices on campus, and they put together a really cool show every year. And I've also loved a lot of their recordings. And so it's been fun to see Noteworthy grow and do their thing and see the impact they're having, especially to empower young women to do really cool things. And it's fun to see their growth for sure. So the audition process for Vocal Point, we have all members re-audition every year. So regardless of if you've been in 1 or 2 years, at the end of an academic year, we have you re-audition. It's a pretty competitive process. There are currently nine slots in Vocal Point. We have 9 singers every year, and we have about 150 come to the auditions, and we slice it down in different callbacks and whatnot. And every year, I'm just baffled at the talent that comes out. They just keep getting better and better, these young students. Typically, kind of how that works is we'll bring them in, we'll do a range test, we'll test their sight reading, we'll have them sing a little solo for us, and we kind of whittle it down to a callback group, and then we'll bring those singers in to sing a little bit more. We get a little bit more in depth on tone, on blending, on pitch accuracy, on rhythm, giving them different exercises just to make sure that they're going to be able to handle the rigor of the vocal point experience. Just as a side note, the vocal point guys are performing anywhere from 25 to 35, 40 times a year. And as a volunteer college student, that's a lot. And so as a result, they're learning a lot of music in a really short amount of time. And so in these audition processes, we're trying to make sure that people are going to be able to do that. They're going to be able to handle that. And so after we do some of those initial music things, we make cuts, we bring them back, and we do some performance, some staging, some choreography. And that will get rid of a few more folks who aren't able to quite keep up with that aspect. And then at the end, we bring the finalists in for interviews, just to kind of get a feel for what their goals are, what kind of team player they are. And after all these different rounds, we typically find some really awesome students that make great members of Vocal Point. It's interesting that many of the guys that we've brought in these last few years have not been music students. They're not studying music, but they're studying things from science to public health to languages to, pre-med. But music is something that they feel really passionately about and know that this is probably the last time in their life that they're going to be able to do something like this. And so they dedicate hours and hours, 20, 30, 40, 50 hours a week sometimes to putting this together. And so that audition process is really, it's my least favorite part of the year because I know that it's going to crush someone's dreams because they want to be in Vocal Point and aren't able to. But at the end, when we find this new group every year, it's a really rewarding thing as well. Just because I know that the great things that they're going to be doing are coming as a result of all this hard work. So while it's not my favorite part of the year, it's definitely an important part of the year, and that process has kind of evolved a bit over the years. But it's helped us find some great singers, and some of the Vocal Point guys have gone on to have professional careers in music, performing, recording, teaching, and then others don't. They move on and do other things, but have some really cool memories to share with family and friends for the rest of their life. One of the biggest things that we've stressed in the recent years of Vocal Point is our online social media and YouTube presence. We perform for, depending on sporting events and different larger arenas that we perform in, anywhere from 30,000 to 100,000 people a year live. But we can reach millions online through these music videos and the singles that we record for streaming. And so specifically for music, we've collaborated a lot with film students at BYU, with film professors at BYU, other local talented filmmakers in the area. And initially when we started our channel, I want to say 8 years ago or so, there wasn't a whole lot of budget. And so we said, hey, you want to try something cool? We want to try something cool. Let's figure this out together. And a few of those early videos did really well. And since then, we've been able to create a little bit more of a budget for our videos. But most of the time, it's a big labor of love because we don't have huge Hollywood budgets. And oftentimes, we're just doing the best we can with these students and film professors who are dedicating time because they appreciate what we're doing and trying to spread positive music, and we appreciate what they're doing and putting together a really cool visual. So like I said, we use a lot of local folks, a lot of local students, faculty members, but the guys in the group are often the instigators of many of the ideas of what we're doing in these videos. I'm a part of that process, and all along the way I'm giving input and making sure that it fits on brand with Vocal Point. But if you want to have hands-on experience, if you want to both learn in a classroom setting and then take that classroom knowledge and apply it on the stage and on the road and in the recording studio and in small groups and have experiential learning, BYU is a really great place to do that. Vocally, instrumentally, if you're a producer, if you want to be a sound engineer, you will have just world-class opportunities performing on world-class stages, working with world-class gear, learning from world-class faculty and instructors. It's a really remarkable place, and I would highly recommend, especially contemporary music, studies at BYU. It's second to none, and it's what has allowed me to make music a career in my life. And every day I'm grateful that I learned and studied at Brigham Young University.